All right, well, good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, wonderful, another Thursday, another day above the dirt. So we are here for our second bidders workshop. So I'm pinch hitting for Sue this morning. Sue had another engagement. She'll be here a little bit later. So during Q&A time and all that, Sue will be here to answer those questions. So I want to just recap kind of why we're here, talk a little bit about why we're here, and then I'm just going to turn it over to the headliners tonight. So if you recall, last week we talked about the RFP process and how we wanted to kind of reimagine that RFP process and initiate a bit of a model program. I know, just like you, I ran nonprofits and I begged for money constantly. I've written more grants than, I can ever remember. And I always chafed at the punitive nature of the whole grants process, right? You either give me what I want exactly, or you're not getting the money. And I always found that that was odd. And when I was a grant maker at United Way, I kind of tried to think about that a little bit differently, right? If we're mission aligned as a funder with you as a program operator, right? Shouldn't we be invested in your growth, in your capacity building, in your ability to do something about that joint mission, that aligned mission that we have? And so from the beginning of the North Orange County Public Safety Task Force, the idea was not just to allocate a bunch of money over whatever period of time that we have it to some pet projects or whatever, or not even to just achieve some programmatic outcomes, but to actually try to leverage these dollars to build the capacity of the whole region to better address the three issue areas: homelessness, youth violence prevention, and post-incarceration offender reentry programs. So in addition to the dollars, we enacted a capacity building process where we did a series of workshops. We kind of tried to cover just about everything from marketing and branding to strategic planning to board development to grant writing to fund development, collaboration, operations planning, all types of things, project management planning, all of those types of things. So when we put this RFP process together going into this next year, we talked about how do we take and leverage off of all that work, right? How do we capitalize on it and align with that work? So we've designed the RFP process a little bit differently. And the key thing, I said it last week, we're going to say it in all three of these bidders workshops and the bidders conference, because we want to really, Sue and I have talked a lot about this, we want you all to really understand this. When we're asking about, hey, we want to see this and this and this in relation to collaboration, this and this and this in relation to strategic planning, strategic visioning, and what Laura's going to talk about in terms of evaluation, we're not expecting you to all have PhDs in that. We're not expecting you to all be perfect in how you're executing those things. What we'd like to do is we'd like you to be honest and let us know, here's where we're challenged, here's where we're having some difficulty in those things. We will help you. That's what we've designed this to be. So you're not going to be X'd out of the money if you can't completely give us the best strategic plan that we've ever seen attached to your proposal. If you let us know, you know what, strategic planning has been a challenge for our organization. Here's why. We don't have the right resources. We can't get our board on board to do it. Or our board is a little bit of a mess and we don't have. Let us know what that is. That's why we've designed this, and then we already heard from some of you after the last meeting. Congratulations to you. Reached out to Sue, reached out to me and said, hey, that really hit home for me. We are having some difficulties. Can we talk to you about these things, right? That's what we're here to do. So we want to build the whole region. So I want you to keep that in mind as you are listening to what Laura's going to talk about. So this is the second bidders workshop. Laura's going to go over the evaluation pieces, how you can build that into a successful application for funding. And then Sue will be here later to answer any questions. So I'm going to turn it over to the wonderful Laura and let her do her thing.
Okay, so I have to tell you, I personally really hate microphones. Can everybody hear me? Okay, I'm very uncomfortable with these. All right, so like Tim said, I will be talking about evaluation today. So everybody who is uncomfortable with evaluation, take a deep breath. And everybody who knows evaluation, take a deep breath, because this is going to be a refresher for you. And I ask you to be patient with me today. Okay, so for today, we have some objectives, and so let me tell you a little bit about the way that I do presentations. So I'm working on presentations constantly, and I'm working on them through the middle of the night. And so as I'm working on this evaluation presentation, I realized that my objective really today, even though I have 4, is really what I want you to understand is to describe the elements of an effective evaluation plan. The others are nice, but really what I want you to be able to understand is how to describe the elements of an effective evaluation plan, because what you guys are going to need to know for your RFP preparation is how to do an evaluation plan. That is what you're going to need to do for your RFP response, is evaluation plan. And of course, in being able to do an evaluation plan, you're going to need to know how to be able to differentiate between a goal and an objective. You're going to need to be able to describe or define an objective, and you want your objectives to be SMART objectives, and you want to be able to craft a simple and sensible logic model. I'm going to try to make these things as user-friendly as possible. And again, I want you to understand that this is really an exercise in building evaluation capacity. So for those of you who already have this capacity, this is going to feel like very beginner material to you, but really, so this is designed to try to build capacity for those of you who are really beginners at this. Please don't feel frustrated. For those of you who have great programming, who end up in the North Orange County Public Safety Collaborative, the idea is we look at the evaluation plans and we determine who needs assistance in evaluation capacity development, and I reach out to you and I work with you to develop that capacity. So if you're writing this and it feels like, I don't really know what I'm doing, it's okay. Give it a shot. We're going to work with you if you get awarded to make sure that you develop that throughout the year, okay? So let's take a look at the components of a responsive evaluation plan, shall we? So the first is the project background description, okay? I need to know what your project background looks like. But for the RFP response, you don't need to describe your project background separately as part of your evaluation plan, because your project background will be described in your response to the RFP already. So as you're doing your RFP response, you will already be describing your project, so you don't need to describe it again for the evaluation plan. So don't include a separate project description for the evaluation plan. You will already have described it in another section of the RFP, or the proposal, sorry. You will need to include a logic model. And we're going to work so that the logic model actually has use for you, and it's not just an exercise where you do fill in the box and you turn it into Sue and you never use it or look at it again. We're going to try to make it so that it's something that is useful to you. It is a working document that lives for the entire year and that you use it for the entire year. We want you to be able to tell us the purpose of your evaluation. We want you to have 2 to 3, or maybe 1 really good, solid evaluation question. I want to know what your data sources are. And we're going to make this PowerPoint available online, so don't worry about trying to write all this down. I want to know what your data collection plan is. So I want to have some sense that you have a plan for this. Who's going to collect your data? Who are you going to collect your data from? When are you going to collect it? Is it going to be at 1 point in time? Is it going to be at 2 points in time, or multiple points in times? What is your data analysis plan going to look like? And how are you going to report this out? Okay, so let's start with our logic models, because that probably sounds maybe the most scary. So logic model is just a graphic representation that depicts the relationship between your program and your intended outcomes. may provide a clear roadmap to a specific end. So you're trying to reach some sort of end with your program. You're not implementing a program to spend money for the sake of spending money. You're not implementing a program because you just all decided that this would be something fun to do. You all are responding to a specific need in your community. You all have a passion for your community. You see a need and you want to try to solve a particular problem in that community. So you're responding to a need and you're trying to solve it. So there is a specific end that you're trying to accomplish, and that logic model should be a roadmap to accomplishing that end. So models are the product of modeling, and modeling should be done in a group. So when you're producing your logic model, you should probably try to do that as a collective, okay, with your team. It should not be something done by one person individually. Although I know some of you might be doing this at the last minute with one person who's in charge of this, I would highly recommend that you sit down and plan on doing this as a team. If that team is a two-person team, that's fine, but two heads are better than one. Try to sit down and do this with more than one person. So why start with the logic model? Because it's to some people doesn't make any sense why start with the logic model. So developing logic models, if done correctly, helps us gain clarity about what our programs do exactly and what they're trying to achieve, even if we think we already know that. Okay, and it communicates it to other people. Furthermore, logic models help us bridge the gap between our programs and our evaluation plans. So let me show you what a logic model could look like. I invite you all, and there's sample logic models on your table, so I invite you to grab one of those. You can't really see, there's program logic model. There should be, does it say goal at the top? Okay, good, because you can't really see it on mine. There's a section for need, resources, activities, output, long-term, intermediate, short-term goals, and assumptions. So that's just an example of a logic model. You all can use your own logic models. If you Google logic model, there is just any number of different kinds of logic model. If you Google logic model, theory of change might come up. I don't need a theory of change. Don't do a theory of change. It's a much more complex, different kind of modeling. You don't need to do that. So stick with the logic model. Some logic models don't do short, intermediate, and long-term goals. They just do short and long-term. So you can do that. You don't need to have intermediate term goals. So let's go over some of the elements. Okay, so goals. With your logic model, you want to start with your end in mind. Your goal is a broad statement about the long-term expectation of what should happen as a result of your program. It is your desired result. It serves as the foundation for developing your program objectives. Your goal should be aspirational in nature, and if the program is successful, it should be like, what would the world look like if your program is successful? These should be big picture goals, like big picture aspirations. So think about, if your program works, how will the world look different? So again, they're very big picture, very aspirational. So I'm going to go forward just a little bit to show you an example of where my goal is. Oh, you can't even see this at all. This is disappointing. So let me just read to you. Now, I was just, I can't even see it on mine. All right. Well, so my example would be, this is not really a program, but let's just pretend for, just for the sake of doing examples, that this workshop is a program. It's not a program, it's a one-off. But my goal would be to increase the capacity of nonprofits. Let me see. How would I want to put this? All right, hang on. Let me pass this to Rachel, because Rachel can read further than I can, apparently.
To expand the evaluation capacity of all North Orange County public safety collaborative community-based organizations.
Okay, so my goal is to expand evaluation capacity among you all. Okay, God, she could read that. I can't read that. Okay, so again, my goal is very aspirational. Think about how aspirational that is. I have a one-day workshop and I want to expand evaluation capacity. It's very big, okay? So feel free to be big. So what we'll do right now is we're going to take 5 minutes, and I want you to fill in for your program that you're thinking about. You may not have your program solidified yet, but at least right now you're thinking about what your program might be. Put down what your goal is for your program. Rachel and I will circulate around for the next 5 minutes in case you need some help. Use your table members, your colleagues, for feedback if you need. It looks like everybody had success articulating their goals for their programs, at least some preliminary goals for their programs. So they should have one. I would recommend one further evaluation, only because I want you to focus on your programming for the collaborative. Always, I am a proponent of programming before. I think evaluation is ultimately critical to programming, but I want programming to be the forefront and evaluation to be the support. So for this exercise, I really recommend one goal, because two can be unruly for evaluation, especially when you're going to be doing programming and we have a year. Okay, so next we want to focus on objectives. And outcome objectives is really how you're going to get to that goal. So it's sort of like we're going backwards. Okay, so after your goal, you want to really think about your outcome objectives, and your outcome objectives are really the steps that you need to accomplish in order to reach your goal. So your outcome objectives are statements describing the results that need to be achieved and the manner in which they will be achieved. You usually need multiple objectives to address a single goal. So even though you want one goal, you usually want 2 to 3 outcome objectives. And they really are what has to occur for the end goal you just listed to materialize. Another way to look at your outcome objectives are, how will your program beneficiaries look different after interacting with your program? And they should be SMART outcome objectives, which I know you've heard Tim say a couple times during different workshops. We'll go over what that means in just a second. But those are going to be the next important piece of your logic model. So in order for your outcome objectives to really be valuable, you want to try to make them SMART. What does SMART mean? Well, it means, one, they're specific enough. Okay, they need to be specific. They need to include the who. Who's going to benefit? Who's going to look different, okay? In what way are they going to look different, and where? Use only one action verb to avoid issues with measuring success. They need to be measurable. SMART objectives say that you should focus on how much change is expected. I don't really think that that's necessary. So you don't need to say that you expect 75% change or 60% change or 60% increase. It doesn't. It just needs to be measurable for my case. It needs to be measurable. It needs to be achievable. It needs to be realistic. Don't say you expect 100% gains. Don't expect something that's going to be unachievable. Remember, you're talking about a year. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be important. And it needs to be time-bound. Again, remember, we're talking about a year. And as lovely as it would be, and as much as I would love for evaluations to go on, for example, we have resilient families here, and it would be so great if we could afford to follow resilient family children for 5 to 10 years. That's not what this evaluation is going to afford us to do. So we're going to have to focus on time-bound objectives here that are within a year and 2 months. We need to be time-bound. So those are our SMART objectives. We want you to focus, your SMART objectives can be short-term, intermediate term, or long-term. You don't want them to be too long-term, right? Because you've got a year. Your long-term can be a year. Your short-term can be immediately after the program ends. So for example, I think it's the Orange County Family Justice Center that offers the workshop or the classes, right? Okay, so your short term would be directly what would be expected right after the workshop or the classes, like directly after what you would expect. So for this workshop, I would do like a post-test to see what you're experiencing directly after the workshop, okay? Intermediate, it's all relative to your program, right? Intermediate might be what I'm expecting you to experience maybe a month after the workshop. And long-term, for this particular workshop, might be the submission of your proposal. It just is relative to your program, right? So like what I was talking about with resilient families, we're talking about children that are in TK. So long-term might be something that is, I don't know, Kate, what are you thinking about long-term? Like how long? So what Kate said is the long term might be their entire life. Yeah, so we're talking elementary school maybe for intermediate, high school for long term. So really, you have to look at your program and think about what your short, intermediate, and long term. No program is going to have the same short, intermediate, and long term. You have to think about what works for your program and what makes sense logically. And when you think about how your intermediate, your long term, and your short term fit into your goals, really you need to ask yourself if-then statements. So I want to show you how everything, I'm going to need your eyes again, Rachel. Everything really needs to fit in to kind of these logic statements. So if your short-term goals are accomplished, then your intermediate goals should be accomplished. If the intermediate goals are accomplished, then your long-term goals are accomplished. Your long-term goals can't be accomplished unless your intermediate-term goals are accomplished. Intermediate goals can't be accomplished unless your short-term goals are accomplished. I mean outcome objectives. You know what I mean. Outcome objectives. And your goals cannot be accomplished unless all of these outcome objectives are accomplished in this sequence. So the beauty of the logic model, if you're using it correctly, is there needs to be some underlying logic behind it. Okay? So, Rachel, can you do me a favor and read a couple of my short-term, intermediate, and long-term objectives?
So the short-term outcome that's listed at the top there is workshop attendees are able to distinguish between program goals and objectives. And then the intermediate is workshop attendees are able to generate a reason for conducting their evaluation. And then long-term is workshop attendees are able to implement an evaluation of their own program.
Okay, so that's kind of what I generated for this workshop. Again, this is not a program, so this is more of a workshop one-off, but if I had to make short, intermediate, and long-term outcome objectives, that's what they would be for this workshop. So what I want you to do now is take 10 minutes and think about what your short, intermediate, and long-term outcome objectives would be for your program. And Rachel and I will circulate around the room and help. These are a little bit harder to develop than goals. Remember, your outcome objectives need to be sequential if you're going to do your short, intermediate, and long-term goals, if-then statements. And all of these should ultimately be the steps that you need to take in order to reach your goal. As we were doing our short, intermediate, and long-term outcome objectives, people were concerned that they would have to measure their long-term outcome objectives, and long-term outcome objectives are long-term outcome objectives, and like I said, we have a year. So don't worry about having to measure your long-term outcome objectives. We won't have time to measure those. So you can say that your long-term outcome objective is that your program participants will be more employable at the, in 5 years or in 3 years after your program. You anticipate that your program participants will be more employable, that they will have stronger relationships with their parents. It could be something that's going to be outside of the scope of a year, and that's fine. And you say in your evaluation plan that your long-term outcome objective lays outside of the scope of a year, and therefore you will not have time to measure it during the grant, and that's fine. Okay, as long as you have a step towards achieving the goal. Remember, the exercise is to build your evaluation capacity. If you don't have time to measure it, it's fine. Yes? Yes? What did I say? Yes. Oh, okay, so the rest of the logic model. Okay, so outputs in your logic model are going to be those things that you guys typically provide. And that's going to be the stuff that we were providing in our progress reports. Number of hours, attendance, number of people served. So attendance sheets, number of cans of food provided, number of hours served. It's those bean counting type of data that you provide typically. Those are outputs. That is what is coming out of the activities that you provide. So there's sort of numerical evidence of the activities that you provide. The activities are the things of your program. They're the what of your program. What are you going to be doing? So the what of my program is this workshop. Bigs with badges. What is the what of your program? It's mentorship. So then you can elaborate more on what that activity is. Sunburst Youth Academy. What is going to be the activities that we're offering that's going to make up your program? Okay, so it's just what are the activities that are going to make up the programming? They should be something that connects to your outcomes. So if I'm offering this workshop, I shouldn't go out and expect you to be able to develop a strategic plan because my workshop has nothing to do with that. So don't propose outcome objectives that are going to have nothing to do with the activities that you're offering. That's kind of one of the common things that I see is activities that are not related to outcome objectives. It just doesn't make sense to propose an activity and then an outcome objective that doesn't have any connection. The logic model should be logical, it should flow. Okay, so we left off at activities. Resources are the things that your organization or things outside of your organization can bring to bear to the program. So actually funding can be a resource, interns can be a resource. So for me, this workshop, I put the Buena Park Community Center as a resource, the support from the North Orange County Public Safety Collaborative as a resource. I have the support of the audiovisual team that's recording. So I have quite a bit of support here. Those are my resources. The need here is that you all have a need to develop an evaluation plan for your proposal submission, and the need is that it's typical for nonprofits to have a certain lack of capacity in evaluation development. So those are the needs. You also want to write what your assumptions are, and this is really important. Assumptions are what you're assuming about the program implementation, okay? And there are some pretty serious assumptions that you need to make. So for example, things that you didn't assume in 2018, 19, I can't even remember when it happened, was that COVID was gonna hit. Okay, so you're not assuming some major catastrophic event is gonna happen during your program implementation. I'm assuming that you are all gonna be caffeinated enough to be awake to hear the presentation. I'm assuming that I am not gonna destroy any of the technology so that I can give this to you. So there are assumptions that I need to make about the implementation of this workshop in order to make it work. So you need to write down what your assumptions are, that no legislation is gonna pass that's gonna impact your program delivery. Big brothers and big sisters, I know that one of the major assumptions are that you're gonna have enough volunteers to run your program. So you all have assumptions that you make about your program delivery that you need to write down. So those are the gist of your logic model. You don't have to use that template at all. If you guys want to do something prettier, creative, you have something that you already use. Like I said, the intermediate outcome objective is something that I like. If you don't like an intermediate outcome objective or you don't have intermediate outcome objectives, you can take that box out and just do short and long term. These are just suggestions, okay? You can kind of do the logic model of your own creation. Just whatever you do, don't do a theory of change. Okay, so the next thing you want to have in your evaluation plan is the evaluation purpose statement. Why are you doing this evaluation in the first place? It's not to satisfy the grant. Okay, please don't write that. You should have a reason for doing this. It should be a learning experience for your organization. I gave 3 pretty nice examples of evaluation purpose statements. The first one is the purpose of the evaluation is to explore what areas of Program A impact youth participants and which components of the program are most effective. Evaluation results will be used to advance programming to increase effectiveness and report to funders. Oh, I didn't tell you what needs to be in an evaluation purpose statement, did I? Okay, so it needs to it's a 2-sentence summary of why you want to do the evaluation in the first place and what the results will be used for. It's like a mission statement, but for your evaluation. Okay, the second example is really nice too. The purpose of the evaluation is to determine how effectively Program B builds capacity of local nonprofits to improve the quality of life for residents. The results will be used to continually refine Program B and in turn to effectively communicate what we do and why. And then the third one is an evaluation purpose statement for an organization. And this is for little organizations whose program really is the organization. Like they're so small that the program is the organization. The purpose of the evaluation is to determine if and how nonprofit E's content inspires viewers to engage in civic action. The results will be used to prioritize content and position nonprofit E as a community leader and resource. Okay, so these are all examples of evaluation questions. They're broad, and they basically tell you why are you doing this. And then underneath your evaluation purpose statement, you want 1 to 3 evaluation questions. And they're basically, what do you want to know the most? Your evaluation questions are important because they're going to guide what you use, qualitative, quantitative, what kind of method you're going to use. So you want 1 to 3 evaluation questions. And how you come up with these are really up to you. But I would recommend that you use your team's collective intelligence. What does your team think your question? What does your team want to know about the evaluation? Okay. I want to know whether or not you feel more confident to write your evaluation plan. That's really what I want to know. Your logic model is one of the best places to come up with your evaluation questions. Look at your short, your intermediate, and your long-term, and come up with evaluation questions from those outcome objectives. And then you can use your existing evidence base, but I don't know how many of you guys keep literature around, and you might want to kind of explore the existing literature and see if you can come up with evaluation questions from there. What is important is that your evaluation questions be evaluative. It's very important that they be evaluative. I don't want you to ask questions like, how many people enrolled in my program? That is not an evaluative evaluation question. Something that's evaluative might be, has my program reached my target audience? So one of the things I could do for this evaluation, if I were evaluating this workshop, might be something like, how did my program participants experience my workshop? It needs to be pertinent. It needs to be important. Somebody needs to care about the evaluation question, okay? It needs to be a reasonable question that can be answered. It needs to be specific, and it needs to be answerable. Again, do 1 to 3 and no more than 1 to 3 because you will not have time to tackle more than 1 to 3. Because it would be the most easiest for you, I would use your logic model to develop your evaluation questions. Now, this is going to seem like evaluation lecture, but I'm only putting this up to kind of explain to you the different evaluation types, really, because your questions can be any kind. It could be, so performance or process evaluation focuses on the performance of a program and examines its implementation, input, output, and likely outcomes. So it's mostly about how the program was implemented. Okay, that's process, and your evaluation question can be process. So how did my program participants experience the workshop? That is process, okay? It is how did I implement the workshop? Was it well received? Did people listen? Was it engaging? That is all process, okay? Your evaluation questions can be process related to how the program was implemented, okay? Did it reach the right people, okay? If you're doing equine therapy, did the kids enjoy it? Did they get out of it what you thought they were going to get out of it. So those are process type questions. Summative outcome evaluation focuses on the outcomes and the effectiveness of the effort. Is the program working towards the desired objective? And that would be, were you able to write an effective evaluation plan as a result of the workshop? I'm looking at outcome. What was the expected outcome of the program? And those can be evaluation questions as well. Impact evaluation question is a rigorous form of evaluation that uses control and test groups, where the test group receives the service and the control group does not, to understand the full effect of the program on the participants. Most of you will not do this kind of evaluation unless maybe your Resilient Families or Boys and Girls Club, or not Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Most of you won't do this because it's expensive. You have to have some really good technical skills in this area. So don't try to do this unless you have some really strong expertise and capabilities in this area. So you have your evaluation questions in hand. Does anybody have any questions so far about the purpose of the evaluation, which is big up here, and then your 1 to 3 evaluation questions, which are down underneath it? Okay. So once you have your evaluation question, the next step becomes, how am I going to answer the evaluation question? And what you need to do next is decide, am I going to answer the evaluation question using qualitative or quantitative methods, or a mixture of both? Okay? And so my little Venn diagram shows you there's quantitative on one side, and quantitative is just basically counting things. It's numbers, it's numerical. How common is something? It gives you scale and scope of an issue. Qualitative data, on the other hand, uncovers meaning. It gives you the what, the how, and the why. And when you combine the two, it gives you the better understanding of an issue. So in reality, combining the two is optimal, but you do not need to do that for your evaluation. You can pick one or the other, whatever's the best for your question, or if you want, you can combine the two to get, optimal meaning. So just really quickly, again, quantitative is precise, specific, or concrete data. It tests existing theories. It helps predict cause and effect relationships. It generalizes and replicates findings. Just think of quantitative as numbers, numerical. Most of you think that numbers are better than qualitative, but that is not necessarily true. Qualitative can be just as robust as the numbers, so please keep that in mind. You don't necessarily need to use quantitative in order to have a strong evaluation plan. Qualitative explores a topic that you know little about. So if you don't know very much about the topic that you're going to explore, your evaluation question, use qualitative. If you're really interested in the rich lived experience of your participants, then use qualitative. If you want to give voice to the how and the why of the quantitative data, like you've got your quantitative data and it's really interesting, but you want to know more about the why of it, then you want to use qualitative. And if you want to explore an emotionally sensitive topic, then you want to use qualitative data. So here's the types of data that you can use depending on if you're going to go qualitative or quantitative. Okay? So again, quantitative is scale and scope. And the kinds of data that you can use are fixed response survey data. So those are things like Likert scale survey data. How much do you agree with the following statement? So a lot of the self-esteem scales are fixed response survey items. Program tracking data, things like attendance, What instructor did they use? What mentor did they get? How many hours of workshop did they receive? So any kind of that program tracking data, the ethnicity of your attendees, that kind of data. Secondary data that you don't collect, so like CDC data would be quantitative data. Qualitative data, the how and why, would be things like open-ended survey questions. So when you ask somebody to specify why they feel a certain way about something, that's a qualitative data. Focus group data, interviews, and observations. And then executing the evaluation. Just to let you know, it's really uncommon for nonprofits to underestimate how much capacity it takes to do evaluation. So what I want you all to do is to make sure that you're planning for your evaluation in advance. Match the plan with the skills and the bandwidth. So it's really important that even though everybody participate in the evaluation, that you pick one person in the organization who's going to own the collaboration. And this is important because if you guys are doing collaborative programs, which I know you all are being encouraged to collaborate, one person needs to own the evaluation in the collaborative, but you all as a collaborative need to participate in the evaluation. So as a collaborative, you should be doing the evaluation plan, you should be doing the survey development, but one person needs to do the ownership. And that person should you should pick somebody who has the skills and the bandwidth to do the evaluation, to lead the evaluation. You should have more than one person reviewing your surveys, okay? Always have more than one person, even if you want to use Rachel or I to look at a survey for you. Don't forget your financials. In your evaluation, when you're doing your budget, try to put at least $5,000 in your budget for your evaluation, or 10%, whichever is higher, for evaluation budget. And then your timeline. Your program timeline is going to be different than your evaluation timeline. So make sure you put 6 weeks after your program ends for data analysis and report writing. So here's timelines, recommendations, and these are just recommendations. So for evaluation planning, give yourself 6 weeks. For instrument design, give yourself 3 weeks if this is going to be a close-ended survey. For data collection, that's interviews, assuming 10 interviews. If you're going to do focus groups, 3 focus groups, give yourself 4 weeks. If you're going to do program tracking, secondary data, you don't need extra time. For analysis and report writing, I would give yourself 6 weeks. This is important when you're talking about collecting data from people. Consider their lives and consider what's going on in their lives, okay? Insisting on collecting data at certain times without recognizing the needs of your clients can threaten the quality of your data. It can lower your response rate, and it can threaten your relationship with your participants. So think about holidays, think about things that are going on in their lives. If you're dealing with students, think about when they're taking standardized tests, and things of that nature. Okay, so logistics, electronic versus paper. I'm almost done. I'm almost done. Electronic or paper surveys, think about who your audience is. If your audience doesn't have access to computers, do not do an electronic survey. Don't do an online survey. Paper surveys, do you need an interpreter? Do you need to translate? These are all important things. If your clients are all Spanish speakers, do translate your survey. This is going to improve response rate. Where should I conduct my interviews or your focus groups? Do it someplace that is easy for your clients to access. Do it someplace that's safe and comfortable for them. If you're dealing with like domestic violence victims, do it someplace where they're going to be safe. Should I record my focus groups or take notes? Always record them. Rachel and I know this. What response rate should I expect? It depends on your incentive, like how you incentivize them, how you get them there. So how do you increase response rate? Say yes to incentives, and that's part of your evaluation budget when you're doing your 5,000 or your 10%. Think about incentivizing them to get there. Send evaluation requests from a trusted staff. So don't let somebody else send them a request to participate in the evaluation. Send it from a trusted staff person. But don't bias them by saying, we really want you to participate in the evaluation so that, Sunburst Academy looks really good. Don't do that. Just say that you're going to invite them to participate in the evaluation to get some input on how the program can be improved. But so be real neutral when you invite them, but make sure that they're being invited by somebody that they trust and they know. Match the ask to the relationship. I've been with you for an hour and 20 minutes today. I'm not going to ask you to participate in a 2-hour focus group with me. Okay, so make sure that you're matching the relationship that you have with them to the ask. And then make sure you send reminders. If you do a focus group invitation and 10 people say that they are going to do it, make sure you remind them the night before or the day before, or else they really won't show up. And then the last thing I want you to know is that each of you, for the evaluation, if you are funded, get 4 hours of technical assistance with Rachel and I. It can be used for any aspect of your evaluation, but I would recommend that you use it for the data analysis component, which seems to be the element that people have the most trouble with. To set that up, you would contact Rachel. Again, this is going to be available on the website. And then if you need support with your evaluation plan between now and submitting the proposal, you can reach me, and I will be available to assist with any element of all of this that we just discussed. And with that, I would really like to thank you all for being here this morning and your patience with me going over the hour. So thank you.